Do you love living in Minnesota but hate the high cost of living? Then I may have a solution for you. Today I'm going to be going over Moorhead, Minnesota's cost of living. Moorhead, Minnesota is a small town of around 45,000 people up on the western side of the state of Minnesota. This place is perfect because it combines affordable living while still being in the state of Minnesota. Moorhead has a cost of living score of 87.6, and this is considered less expensive because it's 12% lower than that US average. And look at this, 10% lower than the Minnesota average. Moorhead is one of the most affordable cities to live in the whole entire state of Minnesota. And the way they get this score is calculate based on the average of housing, food costs, lifestyle, and transportation, healthcare. They take all those and they put them in the number, average it out, and compare it to the rest of the nation and the rest of the state of Minnesota. And obviously Moorhead's really good. 87.6 is less expensive. So as a single person, you'll need about $2,500 a month. Now you'll think, well, that's really low. And yes, it is. That's almost 50% less than the national average. Now this is around $30,000 a year. Now obviously people want to earn more than this. You don't want to be living paycheck to paycheck, but this is a great baseline number to know that your dollar is going to go way farther here in Moorhead, Minnesota than it is compared to other cities across the nation, which we'll see a little bit later. And then also compared to the whole entire state of Minnesota for the bigger cities of like Minneapolis, St. Paul, those areas. Then for a family, about $3,800 a month, 30% less expensive than the national average, around $45,000 a year. This is how affordable Moorhead is. Now, one thing about Moorhead and Minnesota is the tax brackets. Now, if you don't know, Moorhead, Minnesota, it's a sister city of Fargo, North Dakota. Fargo, North Dakota is the biggest city here in North Dakota, around 150,000 people. This metro of Fargo-Moorhead is around 250,000 with all the other suburbs in the area. But North Dakota and Minnesota are split right by the Red River, right down the middle. You know, on the east side, you have Minnesota and you have Moorhead. West side, you have North Dakota and Fargo and West Fargo. The main difference between living on the Fargo side, North Dakota, and the Moorhead, Minnesota side is the income tax bracket difference. North Dakota's income tax brackets are a lot smaller, but the houses in North Dakota are actually more expensive in the Fargo compared to the Moorhead side, so it does even out. So these are tax brackets for Moorhead and for the Minnesota state as a whole. So you're gonna get these the same no matter where you're at in Minnesota. The first bracket, 5.3%, and then to 6.8%, 7.8%, and up to almost 10% for the highest income tax bracket. So this is what I was talking about earlier. We can see how affordable Moorhead, Minnesota is compared to some other big cities across the whole entire nation. All these are red, and red's a good thing in this situation. That means Moorhead is less expensive than these other cities. So let's say you live in San Francisco, California, and you move to Moorhead, Minnesota. 83% more affordable here in Moorhead, Minnesota. Now, obviously, Moorhead doesn't have as much stuff to do as San Francisco, California, and maybe it's a little bit colder here, but 83% more affordable. Imagine how much farther your dollar can go. Maybe you can splurge on some more things, maybe a bigger house, maybe more vacations, maybe a second house. You know, there's so much more opportunity here in Moorhead, Minnesota because your dollar goes so much farther compared to California, compared to Washington, D.C., compared to Miami, Chicago, Boston, New York, and Dallas. Your dollar is going way farther here in Moorhead, Minnesota than all these other places around the country. And yet, Fargo-Moorhead, it's a great community to live in. There's still stuff to do here. Obviously not as much as some of these other big cities, but you're still close to Minneapolis and you're still close to all those other things people enjoy and love to do. There's a lot going on this chart, but what this is the unemployment rate. You might say, yeah, of course your dollar goes farther here in Moorhead. There's no jobs here in Moorhead. There's no jobs here in North Dakota and Minnesota, but there actually is. The unemployment rate for Moorhead, which is this blue line right here, this red line is the Fargo-Moorhead Metro, the blue line is Moorhead, and this is the national average. So you can see 3.8% national average unemployment rate. Moorhead and Fargo, the Fargo-Moorhead Metro, 2.8, 2.6%. You can see how much more people are working, how much more people are getting money, they're building their family wealth through here in Moorhead, Minnesota because of how affordable it actually is and how much farther your dollar is going. So the average for income tax and sales tax is a little bit higher than the national average, 7.1 and 7.4% compared to the 6.2 and 4.6. We can see that the median family income at $91,000 here in Moorhead, Minnesota is actually higher compared to the national average. So if your family median income is higher on average, you're taxed, you know, a little bit higher than the national average, and your dollar goes farther here compared to other spots around the nation, imagine how much more money you're able to have in your pocket at the end of the day after all your necessities are taken care of here in Moorhead, Minnesota. Now, property taxes here in Moorhead, Minnesota, you know, they're kind of typical. I took the median estimated value of a home here in Moorhead, which is around $270,000. Average tax rate around 1.1%, about $3,000 a year. So I mean, this is kind of right along the average for the national average, about the same as North Dakota, the taxes don't really vary that much. Now, one thing about here is the special assessments I'll go into in some other different videos if you want to check out my channel. I'm Zach Sykora. I'm a real estate agent here in Fargo-Moorhead. I make videos on anything and everything you need to know about living, working, moving here in Fargo-Moorhead. And you can follow along by clicking the subscribe button in the bottom right corner of the video. This is the median estimated value of a property here in Moorhead. Now, this is where the real affordability comes in, so you need to pay attention. Look, right here, Moorhead and the Clay County, which is a county with Moorhead in it, are these two lines down here. It's orange and blue. Then up here is the Minnesota line, the yellow line, and then the US line, which is red line. Now look at this jump. Almost $100,000 jump of affordability from Moorhead to the rest of the state of Minnesota and the country. This is where the affordability comes in, when houses are that much less expensive. Housing is one of the best ways you can invest your money to grow equity while still using it as a necessity and not paying rent to a landlord. Now, median estimated value of a home, $272,000. That makes it very easy for people to get into the housing market earlier in their lives compared to some other spots around the country where the housing is way more expensive. That's what makes Moorhead, Minnesota such a great place to live in. When the houses are affordable, all the cost of living is affordable, and people can start to grow their wealth and make their dollars go farther, just like I've talked about this whole entire video. Obviously, buying a home is not in the picture for some people, which is absolutely fine. We all have different situations in our lives, but this is another important graph. This is the average rent cost here in Fargo-Moorhead compared to the United States and Minnesota average. The blue line in green, that's the Fargo-Moorhead Metro and the Moorhead. They're not going to vary by that much. But where you see the real variance is between the Minnesota average and the United States average. For a studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom apartment. Studio in Moorhead around $640, $700 a month. Studio in the state of Minnesota for $880 compared to the United States average of over $1,000. That's over $400 difference living here in Moorhead, Minnesota compared to some other spots around the nation. And you can see that same thing will reflect on all the other apartments. 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. This is what makes Moorhead so affordable. It's the housing costs. Renting, buying, it doesn't matter. If you're interested in taking advantage of these low housing costs, reach out to our team and let's get you into a Moorhead home. We've helped countless people get into their next home and start taking advantage of the equity investment you get in real estate here in Moorhead, Minnesota and Fargo, North Dakota. You can schedule a call through the link in the description. Now, this is the difference between renter-occupied units and owner-occupied units. So owners, around 60% to 40% renter, which is very typical. There's a lot of people able to get into their homes, but there's obviously people who need to rent too, depending on your own living situation. Now, this is some of the transportation. In Moorhead, Minnesota and Fargo, North Dakota, there's not that much public transportation. There's not a subway. There's not a ton of public transportation like that. We do have some buses that go around that a lot of people use, but mainly people are going to ride their own cars, or they're going to carpool with someone else. Almost 80% of people drive their car to work, another 8% carpool. Some people work from home, or 1.5% take mass transit. There's not that much available, obviously, for public transportation being in the small metro, but there is still some options available depending on your situation. So now these are just going into a little bit more of the specific costs. And absolutely feel free to pause this video or watch it back. If you missed something, I'm going to be going over these a little bit more quickly than what I went through earlier in this video. Now you do just other things: gym membership, doctor visits, haircuts, branded shoes and jeans, daycare, primary school. Moorhead does have a great public school system, but there is also a private school system here available in Moorhead for those who are interested in that. This was the breakdown of a cost of living here in Moorhead, Minnesota. As you can see, Moorhead, Minnesota is one of the most affordable states to live in, both in Minnesota as a state and the whole entire country as a whole. If you're interested in getting into Moorhead, Minnesota, taking advantage of the affordability and making sure your dollars go farther, you can schedule a call with our team through the link in the description below, or call the number on the screen. We've helped countless homeowners, get into their next home, sell their current home, and take advantage of this current market here in Moorhead, Minnesota.